Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Reset Podcast. This is part of my 29 Days of Magic series, where I interview a dynamic Black woman a day for 29 straight days. And today, I'm super excited to have Julissa Contreras, who's a creative and social impact consultant. She's brilliant and has an incredible life story. I can't really tell you more about it. Take a listen. Take a listen.
Hi there. So happy to be here with you all. It's exciting to have the opportunity to just connect, especially during this month in which we're honoring so many things that our people across the diaspora have accomplished and are accomplishing in real time. So thank you so much for having me here.
My pleasure. I'm so happy to have you here. So, first questions always and answers are always amazing. And I imagine that yours will be any less than amazing. So, Jalissa, what was your first job?
My first job, ironically, was in the Bronx. I was working at my local councilperson's office, who at the time was Annabelle Palma. And it was a really interesting experience because, I was bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, 14 years old. It was a summer job. And at that point in my life, I knew that I was into the arts to a degree, but my heart was really set on being mayor of New York City. So it was interesting to really be in.
Amazing.
Yeah, I really, I just found myself always frustrated with the conditions of my schools, the ways in which our learning was structured around testing, and something about it always felt wrong. And I thought, oh, well, maybe the adults don't get it because they're not kids, but when I become an adult, I'll be the mayor and I'll get this all fixed. And that sort of got reared off because I found the power of my voice through the creative arts as a writer, as a performer, a poet. And I really found that a lot of the ideas I wanted to translate into politics were things that I wanted to reach people in their heart space. I wanted people to feel motivated and moved to act in certain ways that I quickly learned in my first job. Playing politics means that you have to sort of be a middleman. And so having the voice of an advocate and somebody who's very unapologetic doesn't always work in your favor. Definitely, that was back in like 2006. So, like, very different time. But I'm very grateful to have had that experience because I still do find myself very much civically involved. But I was able to discover what worked for me and really double down on my power.
Coming in strong at age 14. Damn.
Yeah.
Like, I know what I want. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to make it amazing. So, there we go. Um, from jump. I get it. I get it. That's awesome. Okay. So I feel like this is gonna be an amazing story. So, okay, we go from 14-year-old figuring out how to change the world and become mayor to where we are now. What has that career journey been like?
That has been such an educational, I think I would say is a good word. It's an educational journey, mostly because, as most creatives know, we feel sort of beholden to the industries that dominate and create the most money for creatives. So for me, the idea of being like, oh, well, will I be an Oscar-winning actress? Will I be an award-winning director or writer? And like having that pressure really makes for a lot of highs and lows. But I always found that I had a keen appreciation for the way that social services worked in and out of my community, and also through social services figuring out how money is where people's focus is and what people are always chasing. So after working at that council person's office, I spent many years working at Children's Aid, and I did a lot of youth leadership programming, both programming that I developed, contracts that I was running on behalf of the New York City Department of Education, just like really engaged with my community and young people because that's what I was. And so I always say I have been employed since I was 14 years old. So I went straight out of that office and like really went. And it was really with the focus of wanting to give people the resources they needed to live the life that they deserved, right? And so I moved forward with that. And once I had graduated college in 2013, I realized like I love this. I love being in the nonprofit sector. I love the community that I serve, but this space is not equipped to help me get to my next level because of limitations that exist because money is being held somewhere else in the pipeline. I don't know who these people are. I just know we have fundraisers and run around like crazy to make things happen, but those are the people I need to talk to. Those are the people I need to understand because perhaps I can be that middle voice that helps them understand why they need to flow their money into different social services in a particular way. So I transitioned out of that to working for Donorly, which is a fundraising consulting firm for nonprofits. It's a startup by the wonderful Sandra Davis. And it was the space where I really got to dig my hands into business operations in a for-profit space, as well as being in the beginning of what was a big startup boom. And it just so happened that Donorly ran out of WeWork. And so I was at the WeWork locations. I was at Sandra Davis for just over 2 years, learned a whole lot about fundraising. And right, like 2 months before I transitioned out, Trump had gotten into office for the first time. And I realized, like, wow, there's a lot of people who are the donors to a lot of the companies that we were consultant who are very much in support of this individual. And I have questions, and that troubles me. And what are the spaces where people are, yes, still working with money and business and profit, but have a different intention in mind? And at the time, WeWork was a space that was quite the disruptor. So I transitioned out of Donorly into WeWork. I started as a community manager. I managed locations at Wall Street, but then found myself at the only location we had uptown in New York in Harlem. And in that location, I was really able to dig into what I didn't know was a talent for business consulting that I had, right? And in that space, I was able to not only run the business and run a team of wonderful employees who were like-minded, but I was able to connect with people from so many different industries and reaffirm the same vision that I had even when I was 14, which is we just need to create stronger pipelines of communication between the haves and the have-nots. And we know startup and fundraising it goes hand in hand, and understanding the specific missions that people had with their companies was just so inspiring. And so I started to create programming that would really help elevate their experience in the ways that they can engage each other. And that caught the eye of Miguel McKelvey, who is one of the co-founders of WeWork. And so I then transitioned onto his team. So I found myself in what felt by accident on an executive team at one of the biggest startup companies at the time. It was like the biggest unicorn. And it was such a rare opportunity, but I knew that it was mine. And I knew that the universe put it in my hand because my intention was clear. And so the time I spent on that team was really focused around how do we look at this business model, a business that is, yes, wonderful, but when it enters certain communities, actually acts as a gentrifying force. And so part of my job was thinking about how we could think of new business models that could have us, yes, expanding, but also being a force that helps push gentrification back by putting the resources in the hands of the community members and small businesses that might most be affected by our presence and the other businesses that follow once a WeWork presence is established somewhere. So we were very close to opening up a building that was going to be co-community owned. We had all these wonderful programs
Oh,
lined
wow.
up. Yeah, it was like excellent. And then COVID happened. And so
As of many things.
you know? And so that moment was really like a big pause along with other challenges that was happening at WeWork at the time. And so that project never came to full fruition, but I was able to transition out and continue working directly with Miguel on a few other projects that had that same intention in mind. How are we connecting minoritized people to the resources they need in order to grow their businesses and also support the communities that they represent and care about the most? It was a challenging time and we tried our darndest to keep things going, but eventually that project came to an end. And then I found myself sort of sitting in a waiting space of what do I want to do next? During that time, I also had my off-Broadway debut with my show Vámonos at Intar Theater. So like my writing career had a moment where it was like, oh, wow, this is it. Like now this is my artistic window. But the writer's strike happened literally as my show was closing, Hollywood shut down. And so I was really in this waiting space of needing to make decisions. And I just found myself refocusing back to my why. And my why is wanting people to live the life they deserve and having the resources that they are entitled to. Like, there are just certain accesses that all humans should have. And I believe that. And that can look like many things. And I am a chameleon and I can fit myself in any little corner that I get put in as long as I can serve that intention. And so that inspired me to just start my independent consulting business. And so here I am consulting folks on social impact, but I'm also supporting communities like the list in building that vision for themselves and understanding what community support looks like, but also what does it look like to curate a community that self-operates and is really able to sustain even when the passionate leaders who start them are no longer there to serve them. Because I think that's the failure of a lot of communities that fall apart, is that everything falls on the shoulder of one person, when really what we want to do is build an interconnected flow that allows for the intention to thrive.
Well, damn.
Yeah, I said a lot. I said a lot, but that's the journey.
That is the most impactful, delightful, just fascinating story that I've heard in quite some time. Because like you hear people talk all about blending the creative with social impact, and you really, really see it actually come into fruition in a lot of different ways. You're like, yep, no, here's like 18 different like actual. I've been doing this since I was a child. I'm like, yeah, Julissa, you that girl, you that girl.
Yeah, I thank you. And I think it's important for us to celebrate ourselves. It's an area of growth for me. Like in that long story I just told, there's a bunch of other wins that happened in between and big wins, not just for me, but for the people that I was serving. That really was the reinforcement that inspired me to keep going no matter what.
I think that's the kind of, and literally, this is why you play my music magic, because there's so many views out there and that folks don't know that you exist and all the guides that you bring to the table. And the only way the world gets better and more diverse and more inclusive is with the happy voices that show you like this is what it looks like when you actually get out the way and let people do what they need to do.
Yeah.
See?
Yep.
Not that complicated. So talk to me about a time when you had a challenge and you're like, there's no way this is gonna work. And then it did.
Well, I will actually go back to my show Vámonos. So it was the spring of 2023. And, like I said, Hollywood was gearing up already for a shutdown, but the theater industry was, hemorrhaging from COVID still and still is, right? Really doing a lot to get itself back on its feet. And there I was getting my first offer for a show in a time where it felt the most grim to try to get anything like that up. And I wondered, like, is anybody going to come see this thing? Is this going to succeed in any way? Is this going to hurt my career more than it helps it? Because, the data at the end of sales and stuff might not look that great, which might translate to a lack of talent. And so I had that. And then I thought about all of the time and intention I've placed throughout my years working in New York City and all of the people who don't necessarily have a relationship with theater and aren't theater patrons, but are people who care about the story that I'm telling. And so I stepped into the theater and was like, hey, I love this playwriting contract. I would like to rewrite this contract to include all the ways in which I'm going to support in marketing and recruitment, because I really feel it's important that I have a strong hand in making this happen to reach the people who I know best in my own voice and not curated by an outside marketing team. And it was a risky thing, but Intar said yes and trusted me. And I just hit the ground running. I treated it like I've treated any other social impact project. I thought about where the need was. I thought about communities that don't get into the theater often. I thought about people who like to support the arts and people who, even if they're not invested in that story, how can they support the connection to the audiences who deserve to engage that story? And, we started rolling and we sold out the show and then extended once and then sold out again and extended. So we had a run that was like supposed to be a month long that turned into an almost 3 month long run. And so that was a huge win because in that season, there were plenty of shows that were closing, some even closing early, because the audience engagement was just not there. But not only was I able to draw the audience in, because the story was about a Dominican family in the South Bronx a year after 9/11, it was a story that was so universal that it gave audiences that are more traditional audiences a chance to hear a story that was was very much an American story, but through the lens of a community that coexists with them. Dominicans are the largest Latina population in New York City, but a lot of people don't have a deep connection to the culture. So it started to blend in this way that was so beautiful. And for the actors, even, there were so many actors who were Afro. My whole cast was Afro Latine, and I was very intentional about that. And for many of those actors, it was the first time they ever even had the opportunity to play a character that was close to them or their family or their community. And a lot of actors whose it was their first time debuting off Broadway, who have now gone on to get all these big contracts. And even for like our set designers, it was just like this magnet for manifestation where every single person benefited tenfold for the intention and love that they put into the project. And I still don't know how it all happened, but again, I can only say that trusting my intuition and being firm about what I know versus what others are telling me or what the news is saying, that trusting myself is the only thing that led me to show up in a leadership position like I did, which then allowed me to gain the trust of others to follow me in this process. And I think if you asked anyone, no one would say they regretted a moment of the time they invested in that project.
It's like you should write a novel.
I maybe one day I'm thinking about
I
it.
mean, actually, there should be several novels in terms of it's like the Diaries of Deleuze. Because it's just, I mean, there's so much I could unpack. Well, I think the thing that's the most important, and I'm thank you for bringing up Afro-Latin voices because that's also a big part of Tonight Is Magic. I have so many African girlfriends, and I think I've interviewed all of them for 29 days over the years because they have beautiful, wonderful backgrounds, and there's so many beautiful, rich stories that they all have to tell. And same deal. It's like getting these voices out to the rest of the world and showing where they like and helping people be seen. It's like, it's like you're a gorgeous mirror. You people look into them and they're able to see themselves through you and what you create. And that's like unbelievable.
Yes. And I'll add to that really quickly that I think that one of the things I appreciated the most about that story resonating beyond, the Latina lens is that it gave an opportunity in a social climate where there was some division around like, what is Blackness? Who gets to claim it? What does it mean to be Black in America? And having to honor all of the hard work of African Americans specifically, right? And like, just like that conversation was brought up, Dominican Republic having a lot of conflict with Haiti and having its own identity crisis with its Blackness because of the twisted history that was taught under 30 years of dictatorship under Trujillo, right? Like there's just so much history. And so people know the feelings and people know that there's a disconnect, but not everybody knows the why. And so that story was really able to emerge the true undeniable intersections in which we all find ourselves across the diaspora. And for me, it was a strong assertion that sure, this is happening in a Latina theater company and everybody wants to celebrate it because there's some Spanish in it, but this is for us. This is a Black play. This is about so much more than being an immigrant family from Dominican Republic. This is about identity down to layers and nuances that the world doesn't always hold gracefully in conversation. But for this 2 hours you're sitting here, we're going to hold it with grace and with candor that is necessary to have this conversation move the communities who are watching it forward into a new way of coexisting.
It's so necessary. Just like for 2 hours, you get to be center of the story. What a concept. Jeez.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's beautiful to see that you were able to get that done. So you do all the things yourself. And it seems like your days, you something somehow figured out how to put in 32 hours in a day. So what does Julissa do for self-care?
My self-care routine has had to build over time. I was not always good at it, but once I felt the impact of doing too much for others and not doing enough for myself, I realized that I would not be able to sustain myself if I didn't figure it out. And so my self-care started with, bubble baths and maybe, having fun, but then even that social interaction started to drain me. And I turned to practices like meditation. And so I have a daily meditation practice every day. I start my day with some meditation. I also believe in prayer and connecting with my ancestors. And so I take a moment to just sort of level set my day and say, okay, universe, what is for me? Ancestors, what's the next step? Right. And I allow myself to stay in that meditative state. And it's almost like my own pep talk, right? As you know, it is difficult existing in our bodies every day, especially in this country, especially in this climate. And we have to be our own hype men. And so I really take that meditative time to, yes, reflect, and the prayers, yes, to be devoted, but also to remind myself and affirm that, I am enough, everything I have is of a high vibration. My everything I sell, my work changes lives. Like I speak life into myself. And while that's not the same as some other conventional self-care practices, I believe that at the root of all self-care is the ability for your mind, body, and spirit to align and agree with what it is that you're putting forth. Because I can take a million bubble baths, but that might not like fix depression. You know what I mean? And so like really allowing myself
Amen.
to know that it's my soul that needs the self-care, not just my body. And so making sure that my soul gets fed, because once my soul is fed, whatever my body needs, I'm able to do so with more excitement and motivation. And so, yeah, some prayer, some meditation, and some loud and proud affirmations that I say to myself every day, even on days where I feel like I don't need the reminder, I make sure I do not forget.
As I said, it should be book number 5. So, it's like you're a walking affirmation all day.
Yeah,
It's delightful and wonderful. But I guess I have to ask this question because you've given so much already. Do you have a give or an ask of the audience?
I'll give and ask. I'll give that right now, anytime, but especially right now, the best thing anyone can do is really take a moment to connect back with themselves and ask themselves, what am I to learn from what is happening to me or around me? To really ground yourself in what feels true to you and not connected or informed by the noise around you, whether that's at home, whether that's at your workplace, whether that's just the world at large. Because once you are able to really ground yourself in something, you are able to create roots that really allow for you to withstand the storms that happen inevitably around you. And right now, I see an environment where a lot of folks, in their very, fine desire to want to succeed, to create wealth, yes, to break generational curses, there's this sort of go, go, go mentality that is not of our like indigenous ancestry. Like there is a pace of rest and reflection that is part of our practice that might feel counterintuitive to the way our systems work, but we can't work so that our systems can work. We have to work so that we can work for ourselves, whatever functions for us. So I encourage people to really take a moment to self-reflect so that we can create the roots that are good for you, and knowing that your root system does not look like anyone else's, and it's nobody else's place to judge yours. So if they're judging yours, rather than feeling moved by that, ask yourself, is there something for me to learn from people's resistance to how I'm showing up? And oftentimes what you'll find is you're doing just fine, you don't have to change a thing, but other people are responding to the light that you project. The ways in which you glow when you are grounded will inevitably shake people, but that is no call to action to stop what you are doing. If not, it is a call to action to double down on your truth and your purpose. And so I give that and I ask that as well, because when we're all on that same type of time, we can collectively then find each other in the intersections of change and what movement looks like and how we want to organize ourselves to make those bigger changes that feel impossible on an individual level, but are certainly possible on a collective level. But the collective has to be well in order to act. So how can you take care of yourself so that you can meet me at the intersection so that we can act and move forward to continue to fight for our people?
That was book number 7.
So
And
that's
I
my,
have to say that
yeah.
it's not to say anything. It's like just like eating. I just let you preach for 45 minutes. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
Um, no, I'm happy to. Okay, I have one last question for you.
Sure.
And this one is all about you.
Great.
What brings you joy?
Honestly, I love movement and dance and celebration. So I won't say I like to party, right? Because I feel like that gives one impression, but really just like gathering in community. I come from a culture where you don't need to be at a club or at the fanciest social scene. All you need is the right people, the right food, perhaps the right libations, and you are able to just be in community with each other. And so, yes, I love my alone time and I do find joy in being able to be in my own imagination and like it with my creations, but my creations truly come to life when they meet community, right? And everything I create is a celebration or there is a celebration built into it at some point. And that brings me the most joy is when we can all be in the high vibration of celebration and recognizing that this is actually what we live for. We live for these moments, not just the moments we get paid. We live for the moments that we get to connect and feel like we are part of something that is bigger than ourselves.
I love that. That's fantastic. And, I knew you'd be amazing. And I guess you just have a phenomenal sense of self and wonder and understanding of people in a way that's just outstanding. And I'm deeply excited that you on Plan on Doing Magic. I think, you put the sermon and 7 books, 7.5, maybe 8 books. I think your words will absolutely resonate with folks. And so I thank you so much for being part of Plan on Doing Magic. We'll put the details in the show. Post connect with you because you have to hang out with Williams because you just awesome. But thank you so very much for being in this space and fishing up family.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to share my words.
Awesome. And that is our show.